serving Patagonian toothfish or Chilean sea bass. It's quite high-priced commodity. It's a really nice fish, and it's traced end-to-end throughout, and it's a beautiful story around it. But then you always get the criticism of saying, like, well, you know, you can do that because it's a really high-priced item. We think we're at a point in time where you can do that even for low-priced items like this. Sorry. This will take exactly 1 minute, and we'll make it a little bit more tangible. So on capture, what that means is you need to go out into the sea and on the vessels and actually implement the technology there and get out of the way of the workflow of people and do on-site prototyping, because if you don't understand the humans, they're not going to use the technology. Number two, around store. Pretty straightforward, you would think, but if you truly want to build this decentralized, there's quite a few things that you need to consider. And frankly, the technology is not there yet to do it for all of the pieces of data that you want to do, but we believe it will be there soon, and for many it already makes sense. Number three, verify. This is an interesting part. In this particular example, we're verifying whether you can ascertain that something was fished in a legal zone or not, and you use the GPS data but also seafloor depth and then a machine learning model to do that in an automated manner. And expose, it's really important to do that per channel with an individual solution for every channel. You'll see some screenshots from our product that's already live, and you can check that out yourself if you want to. It tells the story of where the product comes from and how we can verify that it is produced sustainably. Feel free to do that on your own devices when my next click comes. There you go. Feel free to do that with your own devices. Thank you.
Very much, Marcus. Next, we have Andres Forgax, CEO and founder of Modern Meadow. Also a World Economic Forum Technology Pioneer for 2018.
Fantastic. Great. Great to be here. Thank you to the government of Andhra Pradesh and EDB for hosting this session. My name is Andres Forgax, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of Modern Meadow. What do we do at Modern Meadow? Nothing short of seeking to transform the world of materials for the next century. Let's talk about materials for a moment. Why are materials important? Well, in fact, they're so important that we've named various chapters in human history after them. From the earliest days of civilization, when mankind first took things from nature, stone, wood, wool, silk, leather, and fast forward to centuries and millennia since, when we were able to work with metals. We wouldn't have, for example, the Industrial Revolution if it wasn't for advances in steel. And in the 20th century, there was a huge acceleration in materials technology with the advent of polymers, plastics. They've become ubiquitous. And in the latter half of the 20th century, we wouldn't have the information revolution if it wasn't enabled by advances in semiconductors. It's called Silicon Valley for a reason. And indeed, something else happened in the latter half of the 20th century. We discovered another wonderful material that has a lot of power and potential, and that's DNA. We discovered DNA and the ability to read and then later write with DNA. So it's only fitting that we look to one of the biggest visionaries of the information age. In a later part of his life, he was actually imagining where the future of technology might be headed. And Steve Jobs felt that the biggest innovations of the next century, of the 21st century, were going to come at the intersection of biology and technology. And indeed, one of the interesting things is that as you look at the history of materials, we have this sense that they go from the natural to the more synthetic, right? And today, still, some of our most precious materials are some of our most ancient, things like wood, silk, and leather. So as we reimagine the future of materials and see what biology and biotechnology can bring to it, we want to propose that the next age of materials is the biofabrication age. That in the 21st century, we're going to create a whole new generation of materials that are uniquely enabled by the increasingly powerful toolkit that we have around biotechnology. Biotechnology was first developed to address questions of medicine, life and death. Then we deployed it in crop science and industrial applications. And now the toolkit has become so powerful that we can actually think about affecting our everyday materials that are some of our most common objects. And what biofabrication means is it means building with biology. It's an integration of biotechnology, material science, and design. And the way we at Modern Meadow apply biofabrication is we're inspired by leather. That's the first inspiration or source of materials that we seek to apply biofabrication to. At the end of the day, leather is a biological material. It's made of a protein, collagen, and we figured out a way to produce it far more efficiently with this toolkit. Now, why leather? Raise your hand if you're wearing something made of leather. Raise your hand in this room. That's why. Almost everybody raised their hands. Leather is a ubiquitous material. It's been used for hundreds, if not thousands of years. It's a $200 billion global industry. About 20 billion square feet of leather are produced each year. And yet, that huge raw material base comes at a very costly environmental footprint. And lots of complications in the manufacturing process. So first of all, leather comes from livestock. Livestock is incredibly resource intensive. It is one of the largest users of land, directly and indirectly, one of the biggest users of fresh water, and a huge contributor to greenhouse gas emissions. Also, the production of leather is inefficient and it's very fragmented. Where livestock is raised is often very far removed from where animals are then processed and where leather is ultimately fully tanned and made into products. Therefore, you're shipping materials tens of thousands of kilometers typically around the world. And at the end of this incredibly long supply chain, long production, there's a lot of waste. Why? Because leather is a natural material and it's got a lot of irregular shapes and sizes and scars and insect bites. And so typically anywhere from 30 to 50% or sometimes even as much as 85% of the material is wasted at the end of a very long life cycle where lots of steps in the production. And finally, leather has limited properties. An animal is not designed to be a perfect handbag, shoe, or car seat. And so you get off the back of an animal, and if you need the material to be better performing, there's a limited set of properties that you can exploit. So our solution at Modern Meadow is to develop a generation of materials that are biofabricated. We call this ZOA. So ZOA is our platform of materials that are inspired by leather. And we make this by producing collagen, which is the building block of leather, through biotechnology. We've designed yeast, much like you would have yeast that makes beer. We've designed our yeast to be able to brew collagen. And you can see the brew tanks here. At small scale, we're now working with very large partners like Evonik to scale this up to thousands of liters of production. We then harvest this collagen and assemble it in different ways to create different material properties, which we can then take through tanning drums. So our technology can actually be produced directly roll to roll, and it can also go through traditional tanning infrastructure. Therefore, all of that art and science that's in tanning that applies that last mile variation and a lot of the beauty to the material can be applied to this substrate as well. And so the advantages, I mean, wouldn't it be wonderful if the only advantage we needed was that it's better for the planet? That would be wonderful. But we have to create a material that actually first appeals to the consumer, that it can win on performance and it can win on look and feel. So we're creating materials that are inspired by leather but not meant to imitate it, that we can actually create new designs and new performance possibilities. We can radically simplify the supply chain, make the production less than a week, shorten the material miles to from thousands to hundreds or less, and create something that doesn't harm animals and doesn't harm the planet. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Andres. Next, we have Marvin Cole, co-founder of Ovamba Solutions. It's a company which has again been recognized as a technology pioneer by the World Economic Forum this year. And it is working to bring the benefits of artificial intelligence to small and medium enterprises across the world. Marvin Cole.
Thank you. Good day, everyone. Hello. Hello. Oh! So, we're talking. And one thing I find very interesting, and you'll find there's no presentation for a reason. Ovamba is very focused on verbal communication. And this is our first time talking about a project we've been working on with Microsoft for several years now. Still in a very quiet mode. But we're trying to bring the benefits of voice-based computing. The ability to speak in your natural language. And I don't mean speaking English. I mean, in Africa, where we're focused on markets, there are 2,000 plus ethnic languages. In Cameroon, our test market, country of 20 million people, smaller than Andhra Pradesh, there are 256 different ethnic groups, each of which has their own distinct language. Now, if you're not well educated, you've not been to a great school, your ability to impact the world, your ability to advance a society is fundamentally limited. Now, today, our R&D has been focused on not only helping the people communicate and access the world's information through spoken word, going beyond speaking to Siri or Google, but to actually coach them in performance. And so this session will be a bit unusual in that it will be interactive. And we'll also go through a bit of history and the fact that, interestingly enough, it's roughly a 230-year anniversary since the French Revolution. Now, what does that have to do with AI? The French Revolution, I'm Jamaican and I speak fast. So if I'm speaking very fast or the accent is a bit unusual, please tell me to slow down, and I will. The French Revolution was fundamentally about inequality. And today, growth and wealth is driven by technology. Images and verbal communication, as of, actually it was January 24, so we're one day away, in Paris and Versailles, drove the French peasantry to revolt with the realization that there was no future for them. Today, as we find ourselves confronting global inequality and the rise of nationalism, and people believing that the system is broken, we believe the only way to challenge this is to actually bring the benefits of technology so that if someone has a question about what do I do, how do I accomplish a task, they have a coach. So I'm going to pick on people randomly in the audience and ask you some questions, just to give you a sense of what this looks like. Sir, when you were a boy, 8 years old, what was your ambition? What did you want to be? Astronaut, doctor? You? Yes, doctor. Are you a doctor today? No. Did you know what it would take to become a doctor at 8 years old? Did your parents know? My parents didn't either. I want to be a pilot. Imagine if at 8 years old you could have actually picked up a device in whatever language was your native language and asked a question and sort of said, well, you're 8 years old in Germany, wherever. To be a doctor, you will need to do the following things. Tomorrow, when you go to school, you probably really study hard in your science classes. Or if you're a young woman and you want to start a business, here are things you need to understand on a fully contextualized macro-targeting approach. What this means is that depending on your individual circumstance, whatever your ambition is, the opportunity is open to you through verbal computing. We've done this. The success factors we've seen with our early test have shown SMEs that have engaged with us have grown 800% in under 1 year. Because suddenly the questions that someone would ask, how do I grow my business? How do I grow my sales? How do I hire someone? That's available to us as well-educated professionals globally. But if you speak, where I come from, Bamileke, or you're speaking of the many tribal languages in Africa, that information is not available to you to understand what to do, how to do it, and also manage and track your performance. So in the case of applying it to other industries, which we've started to do as well as on a test basis, it becomes being that AI coach that can reach you via your phone, that can use imagery, photos you take, etc. to say, have you done the thing we said you should do? Are you on track to reach a preset goal? And can we create a world in which there are no more peasants, where there's equality of opportunity? That's fundamentally what we're about. I hope you found this useful. I will not take my full 5 minutes, but I look forward to speaking to you all and answering questions. And I apologize, we still have some legal constraints about what we can share, but hopefully you found it interesting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marvin. Next is Tom Zaki, CEO and co-founder of this amazing company called TerraCycle.
Hello, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here. So I want to talk to you a little bit about this idea of waste. This is, of course, a very, very topical thing right now. I mean, we're hearing about it from the events going on here at the World Economic Forum, but in general from media. Consumers are waking up, legislators are waking up. I'm going to show you how we look at this idea, but also take a little bit of an exploration of where does it even come from. Waste, and we see this all the time now, these photos have inundated us, is a completely man-made idea. And I would also argue, not just is it man-made, where nature doesn't know what this is, but it's also something that emerged really recently, effectively in the 1950s. So it's only been with us for 70 years in its modern manifestation. So what are the factors that brought waste into existence are two key things. And things that I think even when the consumer's eyes are open, we prefer these things than avoiding the negatives, which brings phenomenal convenience and huge affordability, raising people out of poverty, helping bring health to people that couldn't access it before. And here's how it was promoted. In the 1950s, this idea of convenience was so stellar, and I still think this is so important to us today. Now, yes, 25% ends up in our ocean still. There's a lot of work that's happening on that. We'll show you some examples that we do pragmatically. We do need to think about how do we have less material end up in these systems. And an important thing to know is the vast majority of all this sinks to the bottom. We run a massive supply chain around the world on ocean plastic, and we're able to access material like this that floats. But the really big issue that we'll all have to think about is what happens to everything that sinks to the very bottom. Now, the way we try to grapple waste is in two forms. The first thing is we try to look for products and objects that today end up in our landfills or incinerators, effectively the cheapest legal way to dispose something. And think about how we can create national supply chains to be able to recycle them into something else. Now, the important aspect to understand here is what makes something recyclable versus not recyclable, because we tend to talk usually about the technical ability to recycle something, which means that some technology innovation is what's going to get us out of the waste problem. And I would argue that it's not a technical question. Almost everything in the world can be technically recycled right now, today. It's entirely to do with economics. What waste management companies are in the business of, and here in Europe, for example, our organization, TerraCycle, is partly owned by Suez, a large waste management company, it's all about recyclers mining waste for value. And if the waste stream is more valuable than the cost of collecting it and processing it, it will be recycled, like aluminum, clear PET. And if it is more costly to collect and recycle than the results are worth, it will be disposed. And that is it. We tend to talk too much about technical when we should be talking almost entirely about practical, which is 100% linked to the economic backbone. At TerraCycle, as a social business, what we try to do is think about circular ways to move waste. And I'll show you that everything can be recycled, whether it's reusing hundreds of millions of margarine containers to package plants, all the way to upcycling. We have the world's largest upcycler doing projects like this. But the vast majority of what we do, millions of kilos a week, ends up in recycling solutions, where through science you can recycle anything from cigarette butts, which is now live in 11 countries. In fact, if you walk the promenade, every bus station has a TerraCycle recycling point you may have seen. All the way to aerosol containers, into outdoor gyms. These shipping trucks with PepsiCo are made 30% from post-consumer chip bags. Everything can be recycled, whether into highly technical examples or more durable, low-technology examples. These are foamed flip-flops, just as an example. So everything can be. Even diaper recycling with our partners at P&G launched last month in Amsterdam. So if you are through Amsterdam, you will see these diaper bins out there collecting and recycling diapers. The most important thing, though, is everything you saw is not economical to do. So how do we make the economics work? You know, if we only frame this issue, let's say diapers, so they make up 3% of our landfills, in the spirit of taking responsibility, that's only going to go so far. But if we frame it that by Pampers putting out diaper recycling, they can increase their market share and be able to have more people switch into their brand from another brand, that will really move the system, and that will help grow these platforms globally very, very quickly. So whether it's car seat recycling, all the way to cigarettes all across the world, even chewing gum in Mexico, what I want to leave you with today is that absolutely everything can be recycled. We need to shift our framing from, is it an R&D question, to it's entirely an economic question, and then think about how to bring out economic motivators, whether it's legislative, whether it's opportunistic, that will then motivate stakeholders, whether it's producers, retailers, to be able to finance and put out systems like this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tom. We now have Honorable Nara Lokesh, Minister for Information Technology, Rural Development and Panchayati Raj, Government of Andhra Pradesh, to give you a view of how his government is using technology for governance and everything else. It's the most technology-friendly state in India.
So good afternoon, everyone. It's kind of Thank you. I hope you're not sleeping. It's a kind of convergence of portfolios. You know, I'm the Minister of Rural Development and IT in the state of Andhra Pradesh. It's a very interesting thing that two ministries, unique ministries, are under the same minister. This gives you an idea of why we're hosting this session today as a state. Because we want to learn on what are the innovations that's happening globally and how we as a state can use that innovation to leapfrog. We are one of the newest states created in India. And we have actually the lowest per capita income in South India. And we see technology as our ability to leapfrog. You know, the state got bifurcated in 2014. And as we say, every crisis is an opportunity. 58% of the population received 46% of the revenue. And if you also look at, we had no capital city. And we had the first year deficit of close to $2.2 billion. You know, as Lord Buddha, learning from Lord Buddha says, you know, no matter how hard the past, you can always begin again. And every crisis is an opportunity. And that's where we in the state of Andhra Pradesh have looked at. You know, when our Chief Minister, Mr. Naidu, was sworn in 2014, he had three distinct targets for us to achieve. By 2022, to be among the top 3 states in India in terms of per capita income. By 2029, to be the #1 state in India in per capita income, but also in happiness. And by 2050, actually become a preferred global destination and actually compete with South and Southeast Asian countries in these parameters. And what that meant is we had to grow as a state by double digit. We had to grow at close to 15%. Now for the CEOs here, think about it. Take a $60 billion company and try to grow it at 15% CAGR for 20 years. And that's the task we as a state have. So we broke down. So the whole idea was, how do we create an inclusive growth? How do you bridge the gap between the haves and have-nots? So we have 7 missions: the primary sector mission, the social empowerment, service sector, industry, knowledge and skill, urban development, and broader infrastructure. We have 5 grids, which we believe are very, very important. So it's power, gas, road, water, and the most important thing, fiber. So we as a state, we have a state-run project where we're taking fiber to every home on an Android TV box at the end. And we have 5 campaigns, and these campaigns are actually aimed at connecting to our citizens at large. We've taken a life cycle approach as a state. So we've not looked at, you know, X department, Y department, but what we have taken is, you know, how do we keep the citizen at the center and serve the citizen? So if you look at it from birth, infancy, education, employment, health, housing, marriage, old age, and even death, we call it Mahaprasthanam. How do we map the entire cycle? And how do we as a state offer services? We as a state become proactive towards the citizens. It's been an amazing journey. Mr. Naidu is known for his transformative e-governance initiative. And we call it Naidu 1.0. And that was Me Seva. But what you see today is Naidu 2.0. And where we actually have Aadhaar, which is the India's national ID, which is powered by biometrics. But we as a state flipped it. And we bought it as family as a unit. So we have a real-time census that goes in the state. We call it Goldenate data. And we have a People's Hub where all this is housed. We also have Land Hub, where all the land records in the state are digitized. And by June this year, they're going to be on a blockchain platform, where land can be transacted like your DMAT accounts, like the shares. Anywhere you're sitting, you can buy and sell land. So that's what we're going to launch. And to end, actually, we are now sort of bringing about e-office, where the entire government is online. We transact online. Yes, as a state, we're also powered by SAP. We are the only state that has implemented SAP, our entire treasury. So this is our core dashboard. We as a state love data. And I think it sort of fits into the theme here at Davos. This is a live portal. We track everything. I mean, if you sneeze and cough, we pretty much track it as a state. But the exciting part here is, we track even groundwater. We track groundwater on a daily basis. Because the biggest challenge as citizens of the planet, we've really lost track of preserving our natural resources. We have taken it for granted. And this way we've tracked rainfall, we're tracking even groundwater to the last mile. And this data, thrown open to the entrepreneurs here, can be really transformative. They can offer services to the farmers. They can offer solutions for the complex problems that we have in India. So this dashboard is quite comprehensive, and we would share this link, and we would love input on areas that we could actually do better. The success of the state is our ability to roll out programs for our citizens. This is a very, very interesting program. It's called Chandrana Bima. It's actually an insurance program for all our citizens. So anyone who dies in an accident gets close to 500,000 rupees, which is about $6,000 from the state. It's an insurance program. And natural death, they get close to about $3,000, which is massive in an Indian context. But just look at it, we've been able to settle. So, if there's an unfortunate death in a village, in 15 days using data and using biometric-enabled devices, we are actually able to deliver the money to the family. On the day of the death, we're giving 5,000 rupees for the last right expenses. So it's very powerful. It's just an idea of how we're using data to really deliver services to our citizens. The other project is the public distribution system, where we're using biometrics on food security. We're using biometrics on our ration or on a pension. And the exciting part here is the citizen satisfaction. So we actually call all our citizens in 24 hours. So once you avail a service from the government, you will get a call from the state. Are you satisfied? How can we serve you better? So this is about how do you make government more proactive and not reactive. The other project that we've launched is Mukhyamantri Yuva Nestam. This program is about getting unemployed youth onto a platform. And the platform is about giving a monthly benefit scheme. But then we just don't stop there. We're looking at actually working with the industry to get inputs on where things are moving. And how can we skill up our entire unemployed youth? A very powerful program launched in 12 days. An unemployed youth can just sit in their office using Aadhaar, India's unique ID. With that, they can actually access the entire portal. We triangulate data from 7 different databases, including the education department, birth and death. And this is a real-time portal. Very transparent. And in case you're not eligible for the scheme, we actually tell you why. The other project that we've done in the state is we have something called the National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme. This is a Government of India program. And this is a project that I personally lead as a minister. Using dashboards. And we're probably one of the very few states that have used dashboards. We pretty much dashboarded everything. And we're able to monitor performance real time and link it to the last mile functionary. So performance of government officials up to the last mile is actually linked. And we actually look at accountability coming in. We've doubled our performance in 12 months. And this is an indication of how a simple dashboarding tool has really brought about transformation. You know, I work with close to 26 ministries in this convergence project, and it's quite effective role how technology has worked for us. You know, we also have a real-time outcome monitoring system, ROMs, and this is where we actually benchmark ourselves as a state. You know, in ease of doing business, we are number one in the country, but we're not excited about that. How can we be number one on this planet? So we're trying to learn from our peers in Singapore. We're trying to learn from other countries. How can we be better? You know, we have the Samaja Vikasam, where again it's SDGs broken down into different ways. And we have 10 themes and 47 indicators. So we have Kutumba Vikasam, we have key performance indicators, GVA, and also the SDGs. So think about this, 961 key performance indicators, monitored real-time across 36 ministries. And we have 1 million IoT devices in the field giving us data. And we have a real-time governance center which actually takes this data, does a lot of homework on it, and then advise ministries on where we're failing and how can we do better. And create an internal sense of competition among various ministries. So just to give you an idea of our journey, you know, Aadhaar, as I said, is the national ID program. And we call this Praja Sadhikara survey, where we sort of built a profile of a family. So we've understood how a family, who are all part of a family and how can we give benefits. So 44 million citizens are already on this platform. And we make it transparent. So as a citizen, you can know what's the data that we have about you. You can also know which different government departments have access to your data in the last 12 months. So we made this very transparent to our citizens. Land Hub, as I spoke about, all the agriculture land, urban properties have all been mapped. They're now being geotagged under the Budhar program, and we're making it real-time thanks to blockchain. As I said, SAP, the entire treasury runs on SAP, the only state in the country, if not in the world, that does this. But it's been an amazing journey for us, and it's made, of course, the treasury far more efficient, which I think everyone wants to really know. The other project is e-Pragati. And e-Pragati means e-progress. And e-Pragati is about eliminating two fundamental challenges that we have as a country. The first challenge we have in India is we love certificates. This is something we've inherited from the British. There's a certificate for pretty much everything. But thanks to Aadhaar and now e-Pragati, your thumb is sufficient. You can access your certificates anywhere and making it completely real time. In India, you know, if your house is on fire, the first thing you save is your certificates. We've completely eliminated that. And the second thing is to create single source of truth. You know, many governments globally struggle with this. And the idea with e-Pragati is to achieve that. So what you're seeing is an ERP for government and creating a very integrated government going forward. And why are we trying to do this? Ease of living. How can Andhra Pradesh be the number one in the world in terms of ease of living? So if you look at it, we have a common functional layer. These are all the different stacks that we have as a government. Then we have the infrastructure layer. It could be the fiber network, it could be the e-highway, our dev platforms, the state data center. On top of that, we have a core data layer, which is the PSS, the Praja Sadhikara survey, the Land Hub, the IoT devices that are on there. But the beauty is the delivery layer. So as long as you just have a smartphone, Android or iOS, you can work with the government. You don't need to go to any government offices. And the whole idea is to streamline. It could be B2C, it could be G2C, G2B, B2B. We see government becoming a platform for you to transact. So it's been an amazing journey for us. We have alerts where we go to the citizens. We've used drones extensively as a state. We have amazing infrastructure. But I'll come to the last point, which is satisfaction. In our vision as a state, we said by 2029, we want to have the highest satisfaction in India. And we've done that. We actually look at even media. We get feedback from both print and electronic media, the social media. We get grievances. So we have a 2,000-seater call center where citizens can call 1100, and we get feedback from you. We hear you. We want to understand where we're failing. And here we also have an app where citizens can go and register their grievances. And all linked, of course, again, back to the National ID program. But the beauty of this is in the last few months, we've gone from 57% satisfaction to close to 77%. And we are the only state to actually monitor satisfaction. And this has only been possible because of technology and what was actually demonstrated before I started my session. And the whole idea is to have ease of doing business, ease of living, and create most livable standards in the state of Andhra Pradesh. In terms of ease of doing business, we were ranked number 2. The first year these ratings came out. In the last 2 years, we are number 1 as a state. And the Lee Kuan Yew Institute has been engaged actually to now benchmark across the globe our practices as a state. As I said, we take a lot of feedback from citizens. We have eliminated middlemen and creating a hassle-free citizen services. And this brings to the end of my presentation. It starts with monitoring quality of air, water, and food. We've heard a lot about traceability. We learned a lot about AI, waste management, and it's very, very important. And then we sort of look at how are we improving outcomes in health, outcomes in education, and then creating a quality of citizen engagement. And this is something I think, technology is sort of reducing. We've lost track of our citizens. It's very, very important to engage. The revolutions that you're seeing today in the world is because we're not engaging with them. And only then we can actually create quality of life with happiness. Well, we love data and statistics in the state. If you've seen, we've moved quite well. We are now number 4 if we were a nation, while India has actually slipped in terms of happiness index. So it's very, very important that we track this, and it's very, very close to our heart. And at the end, we are a data-driven government, people first, creating a one government platform to one citizen, empowering the citizens, and bringing out real-time actions. And at the end, what we want to achieve is visible governance and invisible government. So thank you very much. Thanks for being here.
Thank you very much, Minister. Now we have just about enough time for a 15 to 20-minute panel discussion, which will be moderated by Shireen Bhan, Managing Editor of CNBC TV 18. Joining the Minister on the panel are Vishal Lal, who is the Chief Strategy Officer of HP Enterprises, and Raj Ganguly, who's the co-founder of B Capital Group.
Absolutely.
Very nice talk.
Just be careful not to
Move too far.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you very much for giving us this opportunity to talk about technologies for tomorrow and the future course of collaboration between governments, enterprise, and of course the startup ecosystem. That is what we hope to talk about here this afternoon. We had a great session last year as well, and we hope to build on that momentum today. It's always nice to hear governments talk about being invisible or minimum government, which is what Prime Minister Modi has also promised you. You're talking about invisible governments and more governance. But in the quest for collaboration, when you talk about trying to bring in foreign direct investment, especially when you try and talk about bringing in technology companies into the state, trying to create a culture and nurture a startup ecosystem, give me specifics in terms of what you've been able to do and what more we can see.
As a state, what we have done is democratize data. So, in the Indian context, the state is the largest custodian of data. And just democratizing this data has opened up amazing opportunities for entrepreneurs to come and engage with the state. So we run hackathons every month. These are thematic hackathons, and there are use cases given out. And one of the hackathons that we've done is blockchain. And the use case was land records. And look at it today that we're actually implementing it across the state. So this is where I see that government can actually be a platform for entrepreneurs to come and engage and work with us.
You know, it's interesting that you talked about democratizing of data, because the flip side of that is also challenges and issues with respect to protection and privacy of data. And India is still in the process of trying to put a data privacy and protection law in place. So what have you done at the state level in the quest for democratization of data, but also maintaining privacy and protection?
So we have actually created a core data authority that's the custodian of the data. And then they actually come about with the policies and frameworks on our ability to share data. It could be with the citizen, it could be with other private sector companies. So we've had our challenges. I mean, being the first mover, I think we've been more susceptible to hackings. But then we're actually working, and as a state, we're the only state that actually has a SOC to protect our citizens against this. Mm-hmm. So I think it's an ongoing process. Because as we get smarter, the hackers do get smarter. And it's just it's a journey. That's the way we protected ourselves.
It is a journey. Vishal is the Chief Strategy Officer at HP. What exactly are you looking at in terms of emerging technologies? Also, the criticism of large companies is that they're not often flexible or nimble enough, and hence the need for convergence and collaboration with companies that can provide that skill and those capabilities. How are you looking at this going forward?
Yeah, our challenge in many ways is similar to Andhra Pradesh. We are a $30 billion company, and we would love to keep growing at 15%. But as you know, it's not that easy to grow when you have a large scale, because 30% is you have to add billions of dollars every year. So what we do is we think about, end of the day, we are a product company, right? It's all about innovation and bringing new products to our customers. And we think about our innovation is paramount to our success and our being successful in the market and being relevant to our customers. And we look at innovation in three broad buckets. It's a little bit different than what others do, but that's kind of the model that we have landed on. There's organic development. We spend billions of dollars every year in developing new products. We know that we won't be able to develop everything new, so we go acquire companies, right? And then the third thing, which is kind of interesting model that we have developed, we call it Pathfinder, which is we invest in a set of companies. Actually, a couple of our companies that we recommended are in the Technology Pioneers program at the World Economic Forum over the last couple of years. So there is a set of companies that we invest in. We assemble them into our solutions, take them to our customers, and in many ways we look at them as an M&A pipeline as well. So that's kind of how we think about engaging with the community, the startup community that, typically either one, we may not have the idea to go develop a technology which is somewhat outside of our comfort zone. We may not be able to always access the right talent. Right? And so that's kind of the mechanism that we use by which we want to continue staying relevant and continue to innovate in the marketplace.
I just want to spend a little more time talking to you about the third model that you talked about, the Pathfinders, and we saw some interesting presentations early on wonderful stuff that's being done to address some of the real problems and challenges that we face as a global community. But the issue of commercialization and doing it at scale, what do you believe needs to be done to build that out, especially when it comes to these companies?
That's exactly right. And that's one of the reasons why companies want to work with Hewlett-Packard Enterprise as well, because we have the large scale. And in many ways, a couple of our companies, both the companies actually that we recommended to the World Economic Forum, are at billion-dollar valuations now. And if you talk to them, you would get a feel of how much benefit they have gotten from being part of the Hewlett-Packard Enterprise portfolio, because we have, over 10,000 salespeople who are selling products every day, and any startup would love to get access to that channel. And at the same time, we have 100,000 partners, over 100,000 partners across the globe who are selling products on our behalf. So again, these startup companies look at that scale and say, how can I get access to that? And that's one of the channels, right, and one of the mechanisms by which they try to grow.
Raj, let me ask you now, in terms of the future investments and the current investments that you've already made, what is driving where you decide to put your money today?
So we invest globally, and we've been investing in India for a decade now. And we really started investing in India and investing in fundamental infrastructure. A lot of companies that were doing things that U.S. startups had done successfully and were replicating the model. I think what's gotten exciting about investing in India in particular over the last few years is you're starting to see real new innovation, that there's problems being solved in India that haven't been solved anywhere else.
Give me an example.
So we invested in a packaging marketplace. It's a company that sells boxes to every e-commerce company in India. It's something which in the US everyone takes for granted. You can go buy boxes from lots of big companies, but in India it's not as simple. And as you're building an e-commerce company, you have challenges around payments, around procuring packaging, and around delivery. And we've now invested in all three of those spaces because we want to help e-commerce companies succeed. Yet we don't want to be involved in e-commerce because it's very competitive. It's a bit of a race to the bottom. And we're excited about what's coming next in India. I think governments like Andhra Pradesh are doing amazing things in data. The next stage is AI. And we were reading this great article early this week saying that India's risen to be the 13th best country in AI. Being 13th in AI is kind of like in sales being second. You're the best loser. And US and China are doing a lot, and India needs to keep going. I mean, we have such incredible talent in India. Governments are opening up data for AI companies to build algorithms, but there's a lot more, and I think India could be one of the top three in artificial intelligence.
Since you talked about AI and you talked about India and its position in the world when it comes to the AI aspiration, from a regulatory perspective, what is it that you would like to see the government, both at the state level as well as the central level in India, do to encourage that?
So we have a big office in Singapore. I think the Singapore government has been a model for some other governments. We're quite close to the government over there. In addition to what I think state governments like Andhra Pradesh have done in terms of opening up data, it's also then leveraging artificial intelligence, being a customer of artificial intelligence technologies, and not just building everything in the government, but being open to leveraging technologies and platforms that are coming from startups. That's fundamentally what's been lacking in some of the startups. There's 200 to 300 startups in India today that are leveraging artificial intelligence. We haven't invested in one yet because we haven't seen yet the ability to translate the algorithm into a productive use case. At the end of the day, you have to solve a customer pain point with that algorithm. Otherwise, it's not really worth much. And I think government can do a lot to be a end user of artificial intelligence.
So how do you kickstart the cycle? They're looking to invest, but the government can play the role of facilitator. Let me ask you specifically about what you intend to do as the government of Andhra Pradesh.
Hackathons. Because I think that's the best way to get it out there. I think that's the most structured way to engage with the startups. We've done work in water management. The biggest challenge as a state we struggle is lack of water. And we're predominantly an agrarian economy. It's about how do I use this water efficiently. 1 year we had 24% deficit in rainfall, and agri and agri-allied grew by 18%. And the year after that we had 18% deficit in rainfall, but agri and agri-allied grew by 24%. It's about using these algorithms and getting startups to actually come and work with the state. And then this becomes a G2G. So, and in India, with ease of doing business, I think every state is trying to now compete, right? And the whole idea is if they've seen a success story in one state, then the other states are now willing to lap it up. And I think this is just the beginning.
Okay. Vishal, let me ask you in terms of what your ask or needs would be from any government, whether it's at the center or at the state level, in order for you to be able to build on what you hope to do.
Sure, let me get to that question. Can I just add on to something else? I think there was a thread that kind of I captured here, as well as from what I've been listening to over the last couple of days. You asked about data and data privacy, and then you asked about AI. I think the first step is to have data. Right? If you don't have data, you can't do any deep learning on it, or you don't have security issues anyways, right? The way at least I think about it is there's risk and reward always, right? And if you always get bogged down with the risk, we'll never get the reward of it. And I think the great thing that at least I saw from the presentation today is that data has been collected, right? And that is the very first step in doing any type of analytics, right? And then you can do AI on that, but you just need a ton of data to do that. So I think this is a great start, right? And I think as the data gets exposed more, you'll see more entrepreneurs build AI tools on top because they have the data now to work off, right? So I think it's a great start, and I think you'll see more of that ecosystem develop because if you didn't have the data, nothing would have happened anyways, right? Sorry, going back to your question now, in terms of what we would like to see, we are actually looking at putting, most people wouldn't know, but India is our largest employee base today. right? Just think about it. As a global company, we operate in 150 different countries, but we have the most number of employees in India, right? And over time, we have built up, we started with back office like most Western companies did. But over time, we have put our labs there, which is Hewlett-Packard Labs. We have put product development there. So there's a ton of talent that we have tapped into. Now we are looking at putting manufacturing into India. And that's where we are running into a little bit more of a challenge than we did with putting employees in India, right? So as you go to the ask for the country, I think there are a couple of things to be done. I think the country is doing a lot to make manufacturing easier. And I think we, as a company, as an example, we are putting it in. The key there, as it comes to technology companies, everything, it all depends on the ecosystem, right? A company by itself can't go in and say, hey, Hewlett-Packard can't go in and say, I'm going to put a manufacturing plant in. When I can't source memory, I can't source processors.
You preempted my question. How do we ensure that we actually get the supply chain to move as well?
Exactly. So I think that is the chicken and egg problem. But I think that's where the government really needs to step in and say, here are the 2 or 3 industries which are paramount to building out that supply chain, and I'm going to really go after that. And in my opinion, I think from, you're starting to see some dislocations in supply chain, given some of the trade issues at play. I think there's an opportunity for India, and I think there's an opportunity for the government of India to be very proactive and go after certain elements of the supply chain and target them proactively to get them to India.
Just to pick up on that point on manufacturing, and this has been the big aspiration. We've aspired to move the share of manufacturing to GDP from 16% to 25%. Hopefully we'll get there in the next few years. But as a state, what can you do to make use of the opportunity that the current trade tensions between the US and China, for instance, threw up?
Well, Andhra is leading the way in terms of attracting investments. If you look at the top 3 FDI investments in Indian history, 2 are into the state of Andhra Pradesh. One is Asian Paper and the other one is Kia. It's the 2 largest FDI investments in Indian history. So I think it's a very valid point here that we need to create the ecosystem. We already have Foxconn in the state of Andhra Pradesh employing 18,000 women. It's kind of fascinating. I mean, 18,000 women working across 3 shifts. But the point is, I went to Foxconn and I spoke to Xiaomi and I said, no, give me a supplier list. Because it takes 200 suppliers to actually make a mobile phone. Including the plastic, the boxing and the whole line yards, including the, the manual and so on and so forth. So I'm actually going and headhunting each and every one of the suppliers to bring the entire ecosystem. And that's the only way it's not about sustaining, but you have to thrive. And the challenges that we have seen as a country is we attract one big investment, then we forget about it. In the case of our state, no. We got Kia in, I said, great, let's work with all the ancillaries. And let's go to the last mile. And that's when I think we can create a vibrant manufacturing ecosystem.
Exactly.
Raj, you talked about betting on sectors where we are going to see disruption, where we also need to sort of bring in more organized sort of structures in place. Logistics is a classic example, and a large part of the infrastructure story in India, waiting to see that kind of aggregation. But outside of that, because one of the big aims of the use of technology, especially in emerging markets like India, is financial inclusion. And that's something that you're betting on as well. Give me a sense of what you've been able to do and what more you would like to do in the space of financial inclusion.
We're just about to make our second fintech investment in the past year in India. The first one we made is in a payments company that appears like a payments company. It's really a data company that's using payments as a way to gather data. They enable 400,000 small merchants across the country today to accept mobile payments. Use that data then to give them small loans, access to capital, things that they can't get access to from the traditional banking sector. The second investment we're doing is in a peer-to-peer lending company that's based out of the US, but doing quite a bit of their operations in India. They're providing small commercial loans to small businesses. India has a really vibrant, non-banking financial sector, and we think it's one of the most interesting areas for us to invest. That's largely an area that in the U.S. we're not focusing on, because in the U.S. there is big banks, and we don't see that opportunity. And then even in the underbanked in the U.S., you see companies like Square and Stripe and others have already built a market leadership position. India is very different. It's a wide open field, and especially for small merchants and small businesses, we think it's a place that there's a host of financial services that we want to provide. I know it's not exactly the consumer side, but we think enabling small merchants actually enables consumers to be able to transact, to lend, and to be much more part of the formal economy.
Absolutely, and increase efficiency as well. Let me end then by asking all three of you, as we have this aspiration of being a couple of $1 trillion economy as far as the digital side is concerned, and we are going to be one of the most we already are one of the fastest growing consumption markets around the world. What do you believe will be the drivers of growth, especially from a digital economy point of view? Raj, I'll start by asking you. And what should be the priorities?
I really think the drivers are things we've talked about today. It's data, it's artificial intelligence. I think it's the collaboration between government, corporations, and entrepreneurs. That's what we built our investment fund on, that the innovation model is changing. Over the last 20 years, it's been the story of one-word disruption. We think the next 10 to 20 years is a story about transformation and collaboration. And I think India has a unique opportunity to define the innovation model differently from the way we've defined it in Silicon Valley.
Well, we hope that we do see this new model evolve. Vishal?
So yeah, I'm a product of University of Chicago, right? So it's all about capitalism. And the way I think about this is there are two or three things.
Which needs to evolve also.
Over time, yeah. The way I look at it...
It is about time that it does.
No, it's not. I think it's still very valid right now. But that's a longer conversation. We can take it over drinks at some
exactly.
other time. The way I think about success stories are, there are two or three things that need to come together. There's talent, right? There's capital, and there is support from the government. I'm not calling it regulation. I'm calling it support from the government, right? And those three factors, if they come together, they really spur innovation and then spur growth. And I think that's coming together. I mean, if you just take the example of Silicon Valley, right? Why was it successful? The U.S. government spent a lot of money through universities on R&D. There's a ton of talent, right? And capital came there, right? And it all came together. So I think those are the factors that will help the economy grow. And I think you're already starting to see various pockets of that come together, right? I mean, I think what the minister talked about in terms of Andhra Pradesh, you see that, that was true in the state of Karnataka in the past. You see that in Maharashtra. You see that in other states. So I think it's all coming together, and it's just a matter of making sure that, the policies don't change, that kind of goes back in time, right? And kind of takes us back in time, right? So I think it's we are on the right trajectory. The country's on the right trajectory. It's just a matter of making sure you continue down that path.
I will give you the final say on this.
I think every